Hello there, I'm Leo Warder for Kit Guru, and this liquid cooler here is the XLC Predator 240 from EK. 240 because it's 240mm long. There's also a 360 which is 3x120 as you'd expect. Up to now, EK has operated in a different world to the likes of Corsair and such like, and NZXT, who buy in a system from Ace Tech or possibly from Cool IT. And they come up with their own software and they jig a few things around, but essentially they're buying in a system and marketing it and selling it. EK makes components. You buy your bits and pieces in, you hook together your custom loop and you're good to go. You pick a water block, a radiator, some tubing, some coolant, fittings galore, various bits and pieces, pump and such like, and very often you add a graphics block or graphics blocks. Perhaps you're cooling your RAM. Many permutations, lots of potential for getting it wrong. You've got to put it together, you've got to fill it, you've got to bleed it, you've got to drain it, you've got to maintain it. Potentially lots of hassle as well. The end result is often very good, but getting there can be tricky, and the possibility of leaks with a custom loop you put together yourself is certainly there. Whereas an all-in-one from the likes of Corsair, NZXT or whoever, it should be a fit and forget job. So this is what we've got. Essentially what this is some components from EK that they've selected and put together. So we've got a Supremacy MX water block, which is a translucent job, and it's got some holes in it so you could add LEDs if you wished. A Coolstream PE240 copper radiator. It's a thick job, it's 38mm plus the fans. Fans already mounted. It's supplied as you see it with these bits and pieces in these bags, a bit of coolant, a few screws, Torx key and some cabling. There's a PWM fan hub around here, I'll show you in a second. You get your fittings, obviously on the water block and on the radiator, so that's 4 fittings. You've got some coolant inside, black tubing. I've added those bits, the pump. Pump's a bit of a curiosity. Pump is here on the end. They don't specify which pump it is, but looking at the label, it's from their DDC3 range, which appears to be powered by Lang. As far as I can see, it's €76. I'm not absolutely certain that that exact pump is on sale in the EK shop. I'm assuming it is. I can't identify it. They have a few pumps. That fella they haven't specified, whereas all the other bits and pieces are, it's actually on the label on this box, spelled out what they are. The pump they're being a bit coy about. Anyway, it's a DDC3 and it's maximum 3000 RPM pump, which is pretty much all we need to know. Anyway, the idea is, obviously, is you... by the way, this is Intel only, not AMD. Now, the idea is it's LGA 11.5X and LGA 2011, but there's a bit of a story there. So you have your back plate, you have your 4 captive screws, you take off your back plate, which you put, obviously, on the back of your motherboard, and off comes that. Now, here's the bit of a story. If you're mounting this on LGA 2011, so Core i7, I'd call it Extreme Edition, but it's technically not. The idea is that these 4 screws are stepped. You have a thinner diameter thread there, larger there. The idea is that the thin diameter is for the back plate and the thick diameter is for the 4 female threads on the LGA 2011 mounting frame. The idea is you have through holes in the frame, and some motherboards do. So you put it up, the thin thread passes through the board, projects slightly from the back, the thick thread engages in the mounting frame. Now, I have read up on LGA 2011, and there are certainly models from a couple of companies that do not have through holes, so therefore these screws are going to bottom out in the mounting frame. They're not going to attach. I have here a Sabertooth X79 that I've used a few times. That board does not have through holes, therefore this cooler is not compatible with my X79 motherboard. So there you go. So although it is theoretically compatible with LGA 11.5X and 2011, on the 2011 front I would say not necessarily. And the thing is that these screws are captive. They're held by circlips, which I'd have thought you can just remove and substitute other screws, but as things stand, those are captive, therefore 2011, approach with caution unless you have through holes in your motherboard. So, having said that, so you mount your water block, you've got your hoses, you've got your fittings, you've got your heavy and chunky radiator, which is a work to behold. We have on the end a port and we have the pump here. Now the connection points here, I'll turn that for both cameras to see. The two fans and the pump already connected, and then you have one spare connection which is used to power the thing. So you hook in the thing, and therefore you need the one power connection, one SATA connection, and that's all jubbly. One thing I would say therefore is, if you're going to use this radiator in push-pull, that which obviously you can do, apart from the fact it's going to be big and heavy, is that you're going to have to connect those fans up elsewhere on the motherboard. So these, the pump and the two fans are already accommodated. However, any extra fans, if you choose to go push-pull, not so. So that's worthy of consideration. Now, I priced up all the bits and pieces that I established are in this system. As I say, the pump, I'm taking a bit of a punt on it, but apart from that, EK prices in euros. When I priced up all the individual bits and pieces, I came up with a total of 249 euros, which is £177 at the current rate. If you buy the system from EK, it'll cost you 244 euros. So they're not doing any particular favours here. Basically, they've selected a bunch of things, they've assembled them, which is good, they've filled it, so they've done you a favour in that respect. But we're not talking any radical saving by buying these components. If you happen to have them on the shelf, or some of them on the shelf, for example, you wouldn't, you'd want to reuse them. Anyway, this system as it stands in the UK, if you go to Amazon or some such, £169. Go for the 360mm version, £199, which means we're talking quite serious money, but we're talking legitimate money. On the other hand, compared to the likes of a Corsair or whatever, which is down around the, depending on what you're getting, £100 odd, 120 for an NZXT is about top dollar, or you can go lower than that. You can easily get away with a liquid cooler these days for £80. We are talking serious money, serious hardware, but obviously the question is, does it offer you a return for that investment, or are we talking purely the aesthetics of the thing? Good news! After I did the introduction video for the EK Predator system, I went back to EK's website just to double check my facts and figures before I started the build of the test system. And I realised that EK is now listing an alternate set of hold down screws for LGA 2011 without the pointy nose to them. So I thought, brilliant, this will make my life easier. Got in touch with EK, said could I have a set of these screws. They're very cheap. The 4 screws are about €3. I don't know if there's postage on top of that. Personally, I wish they'd just give them away to anyone that's bought a Predator, but that's a different matter. And EK said, which motherboard are you using? I said, Asus Sabertooth X79. They said, no need. The setup as supplied fits. I said, I don't think it does. They said, yes, it does. I said, but you haven't got, I looked through the mounting frame on the motherboard, and I can't see fresh air, so they're not through holes. They said, not exactly, they said. There's basically a membrane that's part of the manufacturing process of the motherboard. Put the thing on, screw it down, crank it through, the nose of the screw will go through this membrane, all will be good. I said, you're absolutely sure? I'm not going to destroy it. They said, it's unusual, but it works. I did it. Here's the result. It works. So, Asus Sabertooth X79 is absolutely fine, didn't appear to be. Now, there are two reasons I wanted to use LGA 2011 rather than LGA 11.5X, but really it boils down to power. The LGA 11.5X is quite easy to mount. You have to actually substitute the standard Intel back plate, so take off the 3 screws on the front, put this in, put it all back together, and that means you've then got these 4 holes which can be used to mount the kit. So apart from that, I didn't really want to do that, but it's not difficult. The main reason is power, which is that my Core i7 4820K has a TDP of 130 watts. That's at stock clock, 3.7 gigahertz turbos to 3.9. That's more than most desktop processors. More heat, more power is a better test. Turn it the other way around, if you're using a low power desktop processor, why are you on a thumping great big cooler like this? So this to my mind is a better test, even though most of you are not using LGA 2011, you're using LGA 11.5. Obviously if you're AMD, as I've said before, this is irrelevant to you. So Turns out I can use my Asus Sabertooth X79. This is very good news. So I've built a test system. This is a Phanteks Enthoo ATX case, which is terrific for mounting all your hardware. You can see that actually the fan at the rear is disconnected. That case fan is not turning, and there are no case fans at the front, so the only cooling going on is what you can see. Although the Asus motherboard does have some chipset cooling fans, which are a little unusual. But that's a complete detail. We've got a GTX 980 graphics card, we've got the Sabertooth motherboard, we've got Core i7-4820K, we've got some G-Skill Ripjaws memory, and then we've got over there the Seasonic Platinum 1200 watt power supply. I think we can agree a decent PC. Now I've done testing with 2 lots of cooling, so I've got the EK Predator and I've also got this Corsair H110i GT all-in-one, which is high-end but entirely par for the course for the sort of cooler you might buy. So it's a 280 radiator, and EK was saying to me, well, hang on, as the 240 there's a 280 surface area, and I said this is a fair point, well made, but the Corsair radiator is much thinner than the EK, so to my mind, 240 very chunky, 280 thin. I think it's a fair comparison. And I tested with the Core i7 at stock clocks. That's at 1.2 volts and 3.7 to 3.9, and I also overclocked. Now Asus makes my life easy here because they have an overclocking profile built into the Sabertooth X79, where you basically hit the button and it whacks up, the voltage goes up to 1.4 and a little bit volts, it bumps up the base clock to 125 megahertz, and then it changes multiplier to 36 times, so you get 4.5 gigahertz, which whacks up the power by about 100 watts on the processor. Which is a great test for any cooling system and clearly is way beyond most processors. So this is good. Now I'm going to say here and now, I tested an ambient temperature of 20 Celsius. In here it's very slightly warm, about 21. And I used the software you can see on the screen, endless screen grabs on Kit Guru, so don't worry too much if you can't actually see what's going on here, it doesn't much matter. What I'm going to say is this, Real Temp, which is this utility here, which is a good little thing, it shows the 4 cores. Now the 4 cores are always going to be at different temperatures to each other, and it's dynamic, so they're constantly changing, even though the thing's sitting here doing basically nothing. When I tested with the Corsair cooler at stock clocks, just idling on the desktop like this, I got a temperature of 18 Celsius. In fact, the same is true of the EK at stock clocks on the desktop. The ambient temperature was 20, here it's 21. I don't for a moment believe that these coolers are taking the temperature below ambient. That defies the laws of physics. What that says to me is that this software, I don't know which part precisely of the CPU it's measuring, but you've got the 4 cores, and also HW monitor over there is also measuring the package temperature. So there are at least 5 figures going on for one processor and others for the motherboard and such like. But to my mind, there has to be some sort of offset on the figures that they're reading and reporting compared to reality, because I do not believe for a second that these coolers are taking temperature down below ambient. That being the case, I'm going to speculate this offset is going to be in the territory of 5 to maybe 10 degrees Celsius. So if we take that as read, other than that, the figures seem to be entirely consistent, entirely repeatable. So, idling with the Corsair stock clocks 18, hammer it with, let's just start that running actually, with ADA 64, and now you'll see all the temperatures whack up and the noise goes up slightly. Hammering it in ADA 64 with the Corsair 35 degrees. Add on a little bit, as I mentioned, still very, very low. Overclocked with the Corsair 60 degrees. Again, add on a bit if you like, but we're way shy of danger territory or anything approaching worrying. The Corsair I was running in their quiet mode. Corsair, this is, you know, for the Ace-Tech all-in-one, which we've seen that type of technology in a number of brands. But the Corsair quiet mode is not especially quiet. It is fairly quiet. It is not silent. But entirely happy with this monster overclock processor, 60 degrees, which I think is just breathtakingly good. EK idles stock clocks 18, thrash it in ADA 64, 33. So Corsair 35, EK 33. 2 degrees, in the great scheme of things, irrelevant. Overclocked, thrashed the processor with the EK, 55. The Corsair did 60. So the EK has now got 5 degrees cooler, which I think is significant, but I'm not going to be too stressed about that. Corsair, 60 degrees, EK, 55 degrees. And if that was the end of it, then you'd say, very nice EK, thank you very much, forget about it, which I think would be missing the point entirely. The big thing with the EK setup is if you're in the market for a custom loop and you either don't really feel confident specifying the parts you want and making sure they'll fit together, or indeed you're worried about leaks, this is basically a custom loop that's been put together for you. So that's nice and straightforward. But the big thing with it is that it is expandable. Let's just turn that round. I have got the thing slid out so you can see it to show you a different angle. But you see, the thing is that you can break into this loop very easily because it's standard union, standard hose. So you can add a water block on your GPU with 2 unions and a bit of hose, and suddenly this setup is cooling your GPU and your CPU, or indeed 2 GPUs. Now it's going to cost you about £100, 85 odd pounds for a GPU water block typically, and then you've got 2 unions and a bit of hosing, plus you probably need to get some more coolant, unless you're going to need to fill more coolant in it. You may have noticed there's no reservoir. Typically with this sort of setup you'd see a tube reservoir. Obviously with all-in-ones we're used to not seeing a reservoir, but with custom loops, reservoir, a big cylinder, or sometimes it's a cubular thing, but a cylinder is the typical thing. The reason there's no reservoir is that there is actually a very small reservoir on the end of the radiator, so essentially it's invisible. If you expand this system to include a GPU block, you still do not need to add a tube reservoir. You can if you wish, but essentially the tube reservoir, broadly speaking, is a fashion accessory. Looks very pretty, but you do not need it when you have a small reservoir on the end of your radiator. So that is good because that would cost you 50 quid plus takes a load more coolant, and of course it takes some space. So you can, if you want to do a practical expansion to this setup, whack on a water block, 2 fittings, some hose, job done. And you're still then shy of £300, aren't you? 170 plus about 100 odd pounds. So we're not talking cheap, but that significant thing there is that Corsair and such, like, they do adapters where you can add one of their all-in-ones to your graphics card, but then you've got to buy the adapter, you've got to buy another liquid cooler, you've got to house 2 radiators. With the EK setup, that huge radiator at the top, once it's housed, you're done. So it starts looking a bit over the top, and then if you're going to expand, it suddenly actually becomes an entirely eminent and practical thing to do. The other thing I would say is, when we at Kit Guru have heard about reports of liquid coolers that die, and this doesn't really matter which make we're talking about, obviously fans can die, but a fan's a fan. The other thing is the pumps. The pumps don't, you can't say they tend to give up the ghost, but that would be the bit that dies first. And once you're into 2 or 3 years old, then really its days are probably numbered. The pump in a Corsair and some Ace Tech, whatever, Cool IT type liquid cooler, they're tiddly little things. The pump on the end here of this setup, I would suggest, is much more likely to last longer. Also, it has to be said, the hardware that EK has used is really quiet. This system is currently hammering away 4.5 gigahertz, and I can hear it, but it's so quiet. It's like almost like a couple of slightly noisy hard drives. Deadly impressive. So here's my takeaway messages. £170 sounds like quite a lot of money. The performance is superb. However, by contrast, the Corsair H110i GT, H110i GT performs outrageously well. It is stunningly good, and this test has actually shown me just how good it is. So if you're looking for a decent level of cooling performance for sensible money, this is possibly over the top. If on the other hand you want something where you haven't got to worry about software, monitoring software, USB connections and whatever, you want something that looks good, goes in nicely, minimum of hassle, and does a stellar job, this is for you. If you want something that does a good job the initial outlay is not too terrifying and you're considering expanding it to cool other parts of your system, then I would say the EK Predator absolutely hits the mark. The initial stumble when they, well, to my mind, slightly mucked up the LGA 2011 mounting, I regard that as very unfortunate. The fact that they're now supplying alternate mounting screws is good. I wish to goodness they'd include them in the kit, and anybody that has a Predator that wants a set, I think they should just send them. €3 is a trivial amount of money. Whack them in the post, boys. So there we go. EK Predator 240, I imagine the 360 is more of the same, but the Predator 240, yes, it costs a fair amount of cash. It's a brilliant cooling system. I am deeply impressed. This is Leo Wardock for Kit Guru.